Former New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani was spreading the false claim, of course, that the United States has been energy independent under the former administration, the administration, of course, of Donald Trump. And that's why gas prices were so low, because we didn't need oil or gas from Russia. Well, this happened, as I said, in an interview on Newsmax, where he is, of course, going to spread all sorts of falsehoods. Take a look.
A year and a half ago at this time, we were energy independent. We didn't need oil or gas from Russia. We didn't need it from Saudi Arabia. We didn't need it from Venezuela. In fact, we were beginning to sell oil and gas. So if we had kept Trump and the American people weren't defrauded in voting for a lifetime criminal for president, we would now be energy independent. Now, 64% of the American people, that has to include Democrats, have said if Trump were president, this wouldn't happen.
All right, so look, obviously, of course we were energy independent under Trump. I mean, all they had to do was turn to Rudy Giuliani's hair, and then you would have all the oil that you need, just dripping right off, just literally melting right in front of your face. Look, obviously, no, that's ridiculous, all right? No, we were so energy independent. We didn't need the Russians' oil. We didn't need the Saudi oil. Oh, really? Oh, interesting. Then riddle me this, right? Why was Donald Trump consistently trying to kiss the ass of Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, at every single opportunity? Oh, MBS. Why don't you just sell us that oil? Come on, please. Now, that was after, of course, MBS had ordered the murder of a Washington Post journalist. Of course, I guess I really don't expect Donald Trump to care about a murdered journalist. In fact, he probably looks at that and says, oh, yeah, get him, get the Washington Post, yeah. Fun. So now, in fact, the Trump administration, getting to the factual information here, back in 2020, the Trump administration was so worried about the price of gas actually being too low. They actually tried to lobby to get Saudi Arabia to cut oil production. Now, what would happen if you cut the oil production? Obviously, you would raise gas prices. That's the whole point. Now, at that time, of course, gas prices were incredibly low as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you had oil companies that were struggling. I know it's a weird thing to talk about, especially given the context here. I don't really consider losing a few billions of dollars when you're an incredibly, incredibly wealthy, well-off corporation. Not only that, but a corporation that gets billions of dollars a year in oil subsidies from the government, from the taxpayer. This is you and I. We are paying the oil companies. And so I don't really like to consider them to be quote unquote struggling, especially when you say that, when you look at the fact that during the coronavirus pandemic, before and afterwards and during, the regular American, working class person has been struggling quite a bit. So now let me go to a tweet here. This is on April 2nd of 2020. This is what Trump had said. Quote, just spoke to my friend MBS, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who spoke with President Putin of Russia, and I expect and hope that they will be cutting back approximately 10 million barrels and maybe substantially more, which if it happens will be great for the oil and gas industry. Could be as high as 15 million barrels. Good, great news for everyone, he tweeted minutes later. Wait, how is rising gas prices good for everyone? Even though they were, yes, incredibly low at that time as a result of COVID, how's raising gas prices good for regular people? It's not. It's not. But again, he was doing this to try to protect oil and gas companies from COVID-fueled, no pun intended, losses of the billions of dollars. Now, what happened after he made this announcement on Twitter? Oil prices surged, of course. They were about $25 per barrel shortly before midday on that same day. Now, here's the thing. The Saudis, Donald Trump had threatened them, first asked them, then threatened them, to try to cut their domestic supply. What did Saudi Arabia do? They actually increased their supply by about 300,000 barrels. Oops. Now, the reason that they were doing this, of course, is that they were engaged in a price war with Russia. Now, the whole thing was, we have this lack of demand, right, because of COVID, which is tanking oil prices, and we have a lot of supply. So let's just increase the supply so we can screw over the Russians. Well, hey, that's what it is, right? And so that's what happened. Now, even at that time, the U.S. was still importing Russian oil. Now, that's not a lot of it, about 10,850 barrels per day. Now, in reality, Russian oil, as I have pointed out numerous times on the show before, is actually not a huge part of the U.S. energy mix. We actually import about 8% of our oil from Russia. So, again, dripping with lies, just dripping. Now, look, as far as energy independence, you got to understand, what does that actually mean? It doesn't mean like, we are independent of any other country where we get our energy needs. No, that's a misnomer. It's actually an industry term, meaning that we have exported more oil than we import. Now, you might think, well, look, if we're exporting more oil, that actually means that we have a lot of oil and the gas prices should go down. Well, not necessarily. That's not necessarily correlated, right? Yes, usually when you have a pretty large supply of something, market forces will try to force that price downward a bit, right? That's generally how it's supposed to work. But here's the thing, right? So now, just because we became a net exporter does not necessarily mean that prices were low, the way that the way that I just explained that. So now, because, and this is how it works, the oil companies are private, and they drill it, they take it out of the ground, and they sell it on the open market for a profit. That's it. They'll sell it to other countries, or they'll, sell it to gas companies here in the United States. It doesn't matter to them. They'll sell it wherever they will make the most profit. That's it. And by the way, that shouldn't be a surprise to anybody. It is literally their fiduciary responsibility to maximize profit for their shareholders. So that's it. It's not our oil. It's not American oil. There's no such thing. It's been given to the private oil companies to do whatever the hell they want with. Now, we could change that, of course, by nationalizing our oil. But of course, we can't do that because that would be socialism. And nobody wants that, do they? So no, increasing domestic production doesn't mean at all that we're energy independent by any means. It just means more profit. And so that's it. As for the claim that, of course, Biden made it so that we're not energy independent, actually, no, we were still a net exporter for quite some time under Biden. Even as late as last year, the majority of last year. And so I'll give you the details on that in a fact check from Daniel Dale. But first, let me just say, Biden doesn't control gas prices or oil prices in a private market. Now, you can make decisions that affect the industry, of course, but the president does not control gas prices. So now, going to the fact check about the exporter of oil, right? In 11 months of 2021, the United States was still a net exporter of oil. He said, in fact, contrary to prominent Republican suggestion over the last month that that U.S. had just recently started consuming Russian energy under Biden, U.S. energy imports from Russia had actually spiked during the Trump presidency. Weird. Why would it spike under the Trump presidency when we were actually the net exporter? It's almost as if we're helping out Russia there by buying a lot of their oil. Very strange. I wonder why Donald Trump would do something like that. That's super weird. But no, again, the reason they're saying this is, hey, look at gas prices. Aren't they insane? It must be Joe Biden's fault. You did this. No, they didn't. At least Joe Biden didn't. No, this is corporate greed. That's what this is. Oil prices per barrel have actually fallen. And by the way, it spiked when you had speculation about the war in Ukraine. That drove up the price of futures. And again, this is going to what speculation is. I don't mean speculation as like, regular people are speculating that, I don't know, oil is going to be scarce or sparse. No, I mean Wall Street speculation. Wall Street speculators, well, what they do is that they made trades based on what they believe the price of commodity will be in the future. So they're basically gambling and guessing on futures. We think that this will affect the price in the future. And so based on that analysis, we're going to either buy higher or lower, or sell higher or lower, and make trades based on that. And by the way, the trading is essentially run by software at this point that does numerous thousands of trades a minute. So if they say that oil is going to be worth more tomorrow because of what happened in Ukraine, and enough people agree with them, enough traders agree with them, or the software agrees with them, and they begin, buying and selling those futures at higher prices, well, all that ends up going down the supply chain and ends up with you ultimately paying more at the pump. That's it. If that sounds insane and stupid, it's because it is. You would be correct, because it is. Look, the Republican Party is gaslighting you into thinking that the president is control of the gas prices. And what Rudy Giuliani, of course, is doing is feeding into that narrative to convince you that things were better under Trump. Yes, were gas prices lower during the pandemic? Yes. But we also had a fucking pandemic. So you could arguably say that it's worse. That it was worse. Just not the gas prices, but there are other things. Now, if you also didn't notice, by the way, in that video, he slipped in the big lie. It's like, oh, you're a criminal president. If we, hadn't been forced into voting for or getting a criminal president. No, a criminal president would be Donald Trump winning. And we already had that. And so, but the whole thing is a big setup for you to vote for Donald Trump in 2024. That's the game that Rudy and his friends and Donald Trump are playing, or these Republicans are playing. And of course, as always, they're built on lies.